We told you last week that CBC's cutting 657 jobs. That's one of the headlines that dominated Canadian news outlets after CBC President Hubert Lacroix held a town hall meeting with staff last Thursday. But there was something else that came out of the town hall, an idea that Canadians should be concerned about. The state broadcaster doesn't just want the $1.1 billion it gets from taxpayers annually. Lacroix also has his eye on your cable bill. Rob Breckenridge joins us now from Calgary to talk more about this. Rob, the idea is that CBC doesn't have stable enough funding, so they should get some of our cable bill. Your quick thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to this. First and foremost, I mean, the CBC needs to figure out what it is and what it's going to be in the future. I mean, clearly, as we saw with the NHL, there's more than enough willingness in the private sector to deliver this sort of product to Canadians. So there's no reason for a publicly funded, a taxpayer-funded broadcaster to be chasing after and bidding for the same stuff that the private sector wants to pay for. So, I mean, first of all, they got to figure that out before coming back to the taxpayer. And look, I mean, I think taxpayers pay more than enough, not just for the CBC, but for Canadian content in general. We do get dinged on our cable bills, and the broadcasters are forced to put all sorts of money into different pots to subsidize TV shows and movies. So we are paying for Canadian content already.
Well, okay, so here's what Lacroix actually said. He was asked about, the UK model, I guess, where if you have a TV, you can't plug it in without a license. That's an illegal act, and so you pay your TV license, and that goes to the BBC. And Lacroix said, imagine if in Canada, the BDUs, that's industry jargon for the cable and satellite companies, imagine if in Canada, the BDUs decided to give us 3 or 4 or 5% of whatever bottom line number, and they committed to that over years. Maybe that could be something. A couple of things here. First off, that's not a 5% on profit. That's 5% on revenue. My calculations are that could be a lot more than the $1.1 billion they get right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's an enormous amount of money. So, again, I mean, it speaks to, well, what are they doing with that money? Why do they need that money in the first place? What are they going to spend that on? And look, if we're going to ding the broadcasters and the cable companies, then maybe we should say, all right, fine, we're going to end all other subsidies to the CBC. And for that matter, we're going to stop forcing the broadcasters to put money into Canadian content and even stop forcing them to do Canadian content at all. I mean, it seems that we've got competing objectives here. We want to force the private broadcasters to do Canadian content, but yet at the same time, we're told, well, we need the CBC so that there's Canadian content. Why don't we just say, fine, the CBC, you do all the Canadian content, 100% Canadian content on the CBC, and leave the private broadcasters to put on the air whatever they think is best for them.
All right, a couple of quick numbers on CBC so people know how big this organization is. They're talking about huge cuts, 657 jobs. Well, in 2005, one report said they had 5,500 employees. By 2012, it was 8,700. Huge increase, 730 staff making over $100K a year, and the average retirement age, 58.3. I remember another story I did. They made the average CBC employee made 39% more than the average Canadian. So this is a well-financed place. It is a well-staffed place. These cuts are not all that large. Here's what I want to put to you, Rob. I'm on the record for a long time saying CBC should just be sold off. If Canadians feel that we want to subsidize Canadian content, what about the idea of privatizing CBC and then there's just a big pot if we feel we must? It's not my preferred thing, but if we feel we must subsidize Canadian content, it's just there for producers and all broadcasters to access.
Yeah, I mean, let's go one of two ways there, as you say. I mean, you look at satellite radio as an example. You've got the Canadian content confined to Canadian channels, and so if Canadians want that, they can find it there. So either put all the Canadian content on the CBC or do away with the CBC entirely, and those Canadian shows that we believe, if we do believe that they are so valuable, kick a little money over to one of the private broadcasters and say, well, you guys show this in prime time, and then you get this little bit of money. So you wouldn't need the CBC at all. So, I mean, that's what we need to sort out in this country, because we're forcing the CBC on everybody, and we're forcing CanCon on the private broadcasters.
The most successful Canadian shows that I can think of the last 15, 20 years, whether it's Corner Gas, Flashpoint, go back as far as Traders, those were all on private broadcasters. Those weren't on CBC, and those are dramas and sitcoms, and people watch them in droves. They love them. They didn't have to go to the state broadcaster for it.
No, and that undercuts one of the other arguments for the CBC, the notion that if we didn't have the CBC, there would be no Canadian content. And as you say, I mean, we have all sorts of examples of private broadcasters producing Canadian content, not necessarily out of the goodness of their hearts, but doing it because that's what Canadians want to see.
Yeah, well, they want to see things like Trailer Park Boys, another example. Rob, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for kicking it around, and hopefully your cable bill doesn't go up anytime soon.
Let's hope not. Thanks, Brian.